The Atlanta Falcons mean business after acquiring Matt Judon and signing Justin Simmons. We talk about if they are the new clear NFC South favorites and if them not winning the division could be a disappointing season. All that and more coming up next on this episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We are your daily NFL podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher. I'm one of the many NFL experts here on our network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in today, making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day and a part of your day, wherever and available for you on all podcasting platforms. So in audio form, be sure to head over to anywhere you prefer to listen to your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever we have you covered. Or if you're in video form on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. On today's show, we're going to be talking a lot about the Atlanta Falcons in the first part of the show with Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons. They trade for Matt Judon. They signed Justin Simmons. They mean business. We'll talk about if they're the clear NFC South favorites and if not winning the division would be a disappointing year for the team. Then Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings will join us in the second part of the show to talk about JJ McCarthy being out, of Sam Darnold can make some noise this season, and their new acquisition in Stephon Gilmore. Then finally, Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns will join us to talk about Jeremiah Owusu-Koromoah getting extended, why the Browns were in on Brandon Ayuk, and a lot more. So first, without any further ado, let's first go to our conversation with Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons bolstered their defense in a massive way over the past week in short order. And here to talk about that with me is Aaron Freeman, the host over at Locked On Falcons. And Aaron, I know it was a busy week for you, busy 24 hours as the Falcons, they decided they wanted to get some new faces into this defense, talented faces to help bolster that group. Obviously, Matt Judon comes in as a pass rusher. Then Justin Simmons is an addition to help the back end in the secondary. For you, you know, in the preseason and this part of the year, not a lot of big-time acquisitions happen. It's usually maybe one team makes one here or there, but the Falcons make two in such short order. What does this do to their defense, and how did you like the acquisitions that they made?
Well, I think these two moves make their defense go to a level of respectability. It was just really hard to look at the defense as it's currently constructed. They have some good players on that side of the ball, Grady Jarrett, AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates. But then they were just really trusting in a lot of sort of unproven first year, second year, third year players at this point. And up to this point, a lot of those guys didn't really show you enough that made you excited about this defense. And for the Falcons to go out there and get two proven solid commodities in Matthew Judon, you know, multi-Pro Bowler, Justin Simmons, multi-Pro Bowler, you know, all pro seasons and whatnot, it really does a wonders to lifting the floor for this defense to the point where now I think you really have to look at this defense, you know, and whether it's going, how good this unit is going to be, time will tell on that. But you at least can look at this defense now and say that's a respectable unit. That's a unit that does have enough players that can cause problems for, you know, upcoming Falcons opponents.
Now, in terms of the compensation that they, I guess, gave up for Matthew Judon and gave Justin Simmons contractually, did you think that the Falcons made out okay with that? Do you think it was better for the Patriots side of things for the trade? Do you think that Justin Simmons got a better deal here than the Falcons did? How were you with the compensation the Falcons had to end up giving up?
Well, I think you can certainly make the argument that maybe giving up a third-round pick for Matthew Judon at his age, given him missing most of last season, given that this is a contract year, may be a little bit too much for a potential one-year rental. I think the concern with that is the Falcons are not currently working on a contract extension with Matthew Judon that caused him to leave New England. And so we'll just have to wait and see. And, you know, if it winds up being a one and done year for Matthew Judon in Atlanta, you can certainly look back at that and say maybe it wasn't worth a third round pick. But as I often say, whenever I talk about the Atlanta Falcons pass rush, which has been abysmal for over a decade, beggars cannot be choosers. And so giving up a third round pick for somebody that is a proven double-digit sack guy over the last couple of years and probably will approach that number here in Atlanta. And the Falcons haven't had a double-digit sack guy since 2016. And then prior to that, I think it was maybe 2011 or 2010. So, like, that's a rare and beautiful unicorn when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons defense, and that's well worth a third-round pick. And I think as far as Simmons and the compensation, a one-year sort of rental on a player of his caliber, I think they paid about what the market rate should be for that type of player.
And I do remember back towards the draft there, and a lot of people had Atlanta linked to players like Dallas Turner and other pass rushers that could help in and bolster that group. They decided to go with Michael Penix instead, but now they get their pass rusher, and they have Michael Penix now. Speaking of, he did not play in the Falcons preseason game against the Ravens on Saturday. Atlanta says they're comfortable with what they've seen out of him, and especially throughout training camp and that first game that we saw where he put on a show. Do you think that the Falcons should still be getting him reps? Do you think they should be sitting him at this point? And what have you seen and heard from Michael Penix so far?
I think they should be getting him more reps just because he's not going to play anytime soon. I can understand if this was a situation like, say, with CJ Stroud last year, or who I think played maybe 23, had 23 passes last summer. You knew he was going to start in the season and he was going to get those regular season reps, because if all things go according to plan, and we'll see if that happens. As a longtime Falcon fan, I know that things often don't go according to plan when it comes to this team. But if all things go according to plan, Michael Penix is not going to play really at all for the next 2 years. I think getting him the reps now will help him in his development in that time. But Raheem Morris has been very vocal about basically not wanting to risk guys due to injuries. The Falcons suffered 2 season-ending injuries a week ago in their season opener with Braylon Trice and safety DeMarco Hellams in that game. And so I understand why they're a little nervous about playing Penix and exposing him to injury, but I do think it would have helped him in the long run to get, at least a couple more series in that Ravens game and potentially next week against the Jaguars. But Morris has already kind of shut that down, and basically we'll just get a whole bunch of third and fourth stringers in this final preseason game. So we're really looking forward to that.
And if all goes according to plan, Michael Penix, their first round pick, will not play a bunch for them this season. Not at all, if at all goes according to plan. But you add 2 high-level players to this defense now, Aaron. You were able to get in Kirk Cousins, who obviously should bring the quarterback level of play up considerably from what Atlanta's been dealing with over these last few seasons. This NFC South division feels kind of wide open in terms of everybody's looking at Tampa with Baker and what they were able to do last season and them winning the division. But do you think that these moves push Atlanta over the top? If you already thought that Atlanta had a good shot to dethrone Tampa, do you think that this is maybe, now they're the clear NFC South favorites, or do you still have a little bit of reservations about saying that right now?
Well, as I said, as a longtime Falcon fan, I always have reservations about the Atlanta Falcons, but I thought they had a puncher's chance before these moves. I didn't quite understand why our friends at FanDuel had them the overwhelming favorites in the NFC South, but I do think these moves now push them ahead of Tampa Bay. I think they should be the front runner at this point in time, but again, it's going to be anybody's race. We've seen many a team, everybody thought the Saints adding Derek Carr last year was going to push them back into division title crowd. So adding someone like Kirk Cousins definitely helps the Falcons, but it's by no means going to guarantee their success. And I think raising the floor for their defense with additions like Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons is going to do a lot more to help them win the NFC South this year.
Would this season be a disappointment if the Falcons didn't win the NFC South this year for you?
In ways, yes. I think the real goal is making the playoffs, and if somehow the NFC South produces 2 playoff teams, then I think it's a success, and the Falcons wind up being a wild card team. I think it's still a success, but I think most people are only expecting one team to come out of this division in the NFC South or in the NFC. So I do think anything less than a winning record and a playoff push is going to be considered a disappointment.
Aaron provides great Falcons insight, and for more on Aaron, check him out over at the Locked On Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in the second part of the show, Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings. We'll be checking in and talk about JJ McCarthy, Sam Darnold, Stephon Gilmore, and a lot more. We got a lot to get to. Don't go anywhere. First, the show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience Formula Footing Championships is also what keeps ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has it covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Or the parts needed, the prices you want, it's easy to make your ride the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. And those lines always exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We are back. Our second segment, Locked On NFL. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. Really appreciate everybody again for tuning in today and making Locked On NFL a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Be sure to make your second listen of the day Locked On Sports Today with Peter Bukowski, who takes you through the entire sports world and gives you all the insight that you need. So check out Locked On Sports Today, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up now, Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings will be joining us. The Vikings, they've been involved in a lot of storylines. JJ McCarthy done for the year. Stephon Gilmore, they signed to bolster their cornerback room. Luke has all the insight coming up now. The Minnesota Vikings have had some brutal injury news over the past couple of weeks, particularly with JJ McCarthy. Here to talk about that and a new addition to the team. That is Luke Braun, the host of Locked On Vikings. And Luke, I know the big news is JJ McCarthy and him being out for the season. Minnesota obviously had high hopes for him in terms of what he could potentially do this season. Obviously, Sam Darnold is going to be the surefire guy now moving forward for them. For you, in the injury in Sam Darnold, how do you kind of process everything that's happened and now what Minnesota has to move forward with this season?
Yeah, so I don't know how much McCarthy we were going to see this season. This is the thing I've been saying on basically any show I've been on that's not Vikings, is people being like, was Sam Darnold really, like, he was going to be a backup, right? Like, no, he was going to play a lot of the year, if not most of it. And then maybe you would get McCarthy in kind of as it'd be kind of like Will Levis was last year. He'll get in when he's ready. At some point, he'll make the switch. But it wasn't going to be week one. That had already been declared. So how much of this season it affects is like, I don't know, November and December. Would they even be in playoff contention by then anyways? Like, it's, I think, easy to look at the Vikings, this Vikings season as a transition year and kind of say this one will be forgettable in the end. But what McCarthy had done, even in just a short time, is convince the Vikings that he is the franchise guy and that you don't need to do anything for your future now. And they've said that out loud. They've used the term franchise QB on the podium. I think that's meaningful. Yeah. That he, not only in just the one preseason game is a small sample, but all throughout OTAs, all throughout camp, the way he works, the way he's taken to coaching, the way that he's approached the game at the pro level has given Kevin O'Connell confidence in him as the future guy. And he'll be fully recovered from his surgery. At the latest, we're thinking maybe the Super Bowl, right? And you'll have the whole offseason to work on mechanics and to continue with like the nitty-gritty stuff that he had been working on to improve as a quarterback. But there is no reason to believe that week 1, 2025 is, not going to have JJ McCarthy under center.
And to me, I think the other big story is, Sam Darnold is going to be the guy now. How has he looked throughout training camp, throughout what you have seen and heard about him? Because obviously he's the guy you're going to roll with here. He's going to be the guy throwing to these big name targets. What's your confidence level in what he can do this season with the talent around him?
We'll see when the rubber meets the road, but everything we've seen so far in shorts, he looks awesome. They're like, whoa, this dude's like actually kind of cooking. Like he's hitting bombs to Jordan Addison, post routes, go balls to JJ all day long. Like Justin Jefferson and Sam Darnold have really had a connection in camp and all that. Obviously not in preseason because they didn't play, but the one drive we did see of Sam Darnold was nearly flawless football from, all the way down to the finest details of footwork. Everything looked the way it is supposed to be. And with a couple of like pretty wow throws in there as well. So I think like for Darnold, it's kind of his moment. He's not the future of the Vikings. Everybody in the building, including him, understands that he is here to keep the seat warm. And originally he was here to keep the seat warm for partially a year. Now it's the whole year, which means he gets a whole year to prove himself to 31 other NFL teams and say, come pay me. I'm the guy now. Look, I was struggling in New York And, I was young and I was seeing ghosts and we had all those problems, but he's taken a bit of a sabbatical here, a year in Carolina, a year in San Francisco, out of the spotlight, learning, growing, developing. So just from an individual perspective, this is now Sam Darnold's moment to sort of work his way back into the conversation of one of the 32 NFL starting quarterbacks. He'll be our starting quarterback this year. The thing is, we'll find out how real it all is. This was just camp. This was just one drive of one preseason game. When you get against real defenses who are actually deploying the real looks and the real deception that they're all saving for the regular season. And, we're starting against Wink Martindale, right? We're starting against the Giants. When that happens, do we get back into the old habits? Are we still going to be able to protect the football? If Sam Darnold can protect the football, a lot of that talent that got him drafted 3rd overall comes online, but that's the big if. And that's the question he's never had the right answer to is, can you protect the football? So that's really the central question here. For me, my expectations are very tempered. It's probably going to be messy. You're probably going to have some ups and some downs, and it's going to be a very weird season. But for Darnold, if he can play responsible game managing quarterback, I could see him earning himself quite a bit of money in 2025 and beyond.
And to your point, I mean, we've seen this path before plenty of times. I think Baker Mayfield, and it's not a 1-for-1 scenario, but like Baker, didn't work out in Cleveland, had the spot. Yep, exactly. There's already a blueprint for this. And I think that Sam Darnold could definitely have that potential career resurgence, I would say, in Minnesota. But with this cornerback room, I think now the Vikings, they do bring in Stephon Gilmore. They have a bunch of guys that can potentially work and that they have invested some things in. Overall, with this room, do you feel like it is at least trending towards being more of a strength than it was at the beginning of the offseason? Do you think that there are more? And do you think Gilmore helps that enough to where your confidence level, you feel at least a little better about where they are right now?
They walked into the season with a room with a lot of these like young question mark kind of guys like Andrew Booth. And of course they drafted Kyrie Jackson, who passed away. And, Mekhi Blackman gets hurt. Andrew Booth, they trade away. And suddenly you've kind of transformed what was a room that was like young and developing into a room of like a whole bunch of old Band-Aids. You've got Shaq Griffin, whatever he's got left in the tank. Now you have Stephon Gilmore, whatever he's got left in the tank. Fabian Moreau, whatever he's got left in the tank. And Byron Murphy, who was the elder statesman of the room last year and is now just like one of another few veterans. So this is a very veteran cornerback room. They'll probably want to play a little bit more man coverage than they did last year. They blitzed a lot and played zone behind it a lot, which was kind of the novelty of what they did. It's usually like a bit of a no-no, but they found a way to do it and get away with it for a while. But now this room implies that they're going to want to rely on those corners a little bit more, and they couldn't last year. That's why they had to go so far off the reservation. In terms of what impact Gilmore himself has on the Vikings, he signs for $10 million contract, 7 of it guaranteed, 1 year. How that room shakes itself out now is very interesting, because what does he have left in the tank, right? Like, he was solid last year, but time only goes one direction. And you're competing with Shaq Griffin, who they had penciled in basically as he's been hurt all camp, but they expect to have him back for week 1. And he's been basically penciled in as a starter. You have Byron Murphy, who played at a very high level last year. Everybody's very happy with him. Fabian Moreau is having a very good camp as sort of another reclamation guy. And then there's a Caleb Evans, who started the entire season last year. So what do we do with that? And where Gilmore fits in, to me, is really hard to parse out. I don't know, because I don't know how close his level of play is this year to what it was last year. And I don't even know how much I value what it was last year as compared to all these other options. But I guess you're just sort of throwing a bunch of guys at the wall and hoping a couple of them are good. Let me tell you a story. So my brother-in-law, when he was a kid, he was messing around and ended up kicking a hole in his wall, in his bedroom wall. He lives in New York, so winter it got cold, but he didn't want to get in trouble. So he just kind of let a giant pile of laundry sit in front of that hole. And for 10 years, nobody noticed. And he just dealt with being cold in his room. Wow. Never noticed. This is hilarious now. They finally found it when he went away for college. That feels like what we've done with this cornerback room. There is a serious underlying and permanent issue that needs to get solved, Because ultimately, I mean, Shaq Griffin, 1-year deal. Stephon Gilmore, 1-year deal. Byron Murphy, he's in the last year of a deal. Fabian Moreau, 1-year deal. Caleb Evans, 2 years left on his deal. By 2026, none of these guys are going to be on the team anymore unless you do something about it. So it's papered over. Is it a glaring enough weakness where I'm going into every single game going, I don't know how you cover all these guys? Maybe not. But again, well, like maybe, like we'll see. Everybody's got question marks. But even after this, even if you do survive this season with reasonable cornerback play, they're all free agents. So you got to go right back to this well again. It's been a very heavily mismanaged position going all the way back to Rick Spielman. I think it was a big reason Rick Spielman got fired after 2021. And Kwesi has, he's thrown 1 second-round pick at it, and that was Andrew Booth, and he is a Cowboy now, or traded for a guy that the Cowboys were going to cut. So it's not a great room. Long-term, short-term, a lot of problems.
We'll see if the Vikings can get something going with Sam Darnold this season, but be sure to check out Luke over at Locked On Vikings and right here on Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Finally, we're going to be moving into Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns. He's going to be talking about Jeremiah Owusu-Koromoah getting extended, also about the Browns and their pursuit of Brandon Ayuk, why they were involved in that situation. We got a lot to get to. Don't go anywhere here on Locked On NFL. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I love going on FanDuel, checking the odds, and making sure that I'm caught up to date with all that they have to offer. We have something a little different for you this time. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So, obviously, with football coming up, the regular season starting up in just a couple of weeks here, Ravens and Chiefs. Ravens open up that game as 2.5-point underdogs over on FanDuel. If you want to head over to FanDuel and check out that line, be sure to do so. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on and download America's #1 sportsbook. We're back, our final segment, Locked On NFL. Kevin Oestreicher still rocking out with you here on this Monday edition of the show, 1 week closer to football. Really appreciate everybody for being here again. We bring you 5 days a week of NFL content, Monday through Friday, consistently. So if you have a friend or a family member who wants that daily NFL coverage, be sure to tell them to keep it locked on NFL. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe over on YouTube. Follow along in audio form as well. We're going to have Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns on the show to talk about Jeremiah Owusu-Koromoah getting extended, a bit of a Browns outlook. And is there trouble in the Browns wide receiver room with them being involved in Brandon Ayuk? We'll talk about all that now. The Cleveland Browns extend a promising member of their defensive unit, Jeremiah Owusu-Koromoah. Here to talk about that and much more Browns with me is Jeff Lloyd, the host over at Locked On Browns. And Jeff, I know that JOK has been a big part of what Cleveland has done over the past couple of years with his sideline-to-sideline speed, his versatility, and they reward him with a big-time extension, although an extension that ended up being less than what Patrick Queen got from the Pittsburgh Steelers on his contract. So there might be some value in there with him. What did you think of the value, and what does JOK bring to this defense that Cleveland wanted in their group for a couple more years?
Well, when it was first, doing episodes on this and trying to figure in the numbers, and you looked, at where all the linebacker number was, he wasn't going to go for Roquan Smith money. Obviously nobody was foolish enough to believe that. Edmonds, as good as he is probably making more than maybe he deserves, perhaps. And hey, God bless him. But you figured it was going to be right there in that Queen, Matt Milano, and sadly for Buffalo, obviously, and right in that era. But the thing was, for JOK, he was signing an extension with the team who drafted him. And looking around, and this is the Browns' 13th player that makes over $10 million. So if you want to stay with an organization like that, you probably understand you're not getting top dollar. You have to be of that realization. Look, would I take JOK over Patrick Queen? Absolutely. So the fact that I'm getting JOK as a cheaper number over Patrick Quinn, I am more than okay with. It wasn't really like a surprise. He was strong as a rookie. Second year was good too. It ended a little early because of injury. The year 3 jump though, the Browns finally put out a competent defensive line, and you finally were able to just have him run around and make plays. This was always the vision The problem is they didn't really have the right guy structurally in front of him to just let him run around and make plays. Led the league. It was 20 tackles for either 0 or negative. Had 3.5 sacks, had over 100 tackles. I mean, there was no, doubt that this was going to get done between the two of them. So, for the Browns are extremely happy. And look, we're to this point now where we're starting to extend guys. Look, we don't ever have guys with the Cleveland Browns that get extended by the same front office that necessarily drafted them. Yeah. So that shows, the Browns, like stability. And this is one of the biggest things. And look, they're not winning Super Bowls. But just for the Browns to be considered a stable organization is light years. I've been covering this is now my 8th season. This was not the case in years 1, 2, 3 of Locked On Browns when I was covering this team.
Yeah, and consistency is key, and I think they've also done a much better job of hitting on their draft picks, not only with their top picks, but you obviously go to the mid-rounds, and you're seeing a lot of those guys also. Cleveland's getting the benefits of drafting well there too. But Jeff, I know one of the big storylines for Cleveland was their involvement in the Brandon Ayuk situation. Obviously, the Browns part of that now appears to be over, and it seems it's really Pittsburgh and San Francisco as the 2 finalists. But apparently the rumors were that Amari Cooper was involved in talks for this deal, some draft compensation as well. Is there any discontent with Cleveland's wide receiver group? I mean, they bring in Jerry Jeudy. They still have Cooper. Elijah Moore is still there. What is your confidence level in this group? But then what do you think the organization's confidence level is that they were sniffing around Ayuk here?
Well, there's no mistake. I mean, look, you got to keep in mind, since they brought in Amari Cooper, everybody who looks to make the final 53 for the Browns at the wide receiver position, which is Cooper, which is Jeudy, which is probably Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, David Bell, and now it looks like the rookie Jamari Thrash is really showing out well. They may keep a 7th, who knows? But of those 6, Amari Cooper was acquired a little bit before Deshaun Watson, but everybody else was acquired after that. So this felt like this was a room they certainly wanted to turn over, wanted to give it a today feel and also kind of a tomorrow feel to it. But look, it's simple. Look, the Browns did not want to guarantee any money towards Amari Cooper for 2025. So they found a way to make 2024 a little bit more palatable for Amari Cooper. Still didn't give him what he wanted as far as, and there was nothing wrong with Amari asking for more money. He's earned it, certainly has. And the market was hitting. It was the right time to ask. But wide receiver, 30 years old. It's, it's a big thing within the league. It's certainly a big thing within the analytics of the position. So if there was the possibility of, a Brandon Ayuk dalliance and seeing it, the Browns were going to get a receiver who had pretty much equal or better production, whether it was yards, touchdowns, receptions, than Amari Cooper the last 2 years. But he was also 4 years younger. This is a move the Browns make and make all day long and make twice on Sunday. It's not saying they're done with Amari Cooper after 2024. If they have to, put a large amount on him because he went out and now for a 3rd year earned it, that's fine. But also the same respect, the Browns now have draft capital. They didn't have this the last 2 years. So if they feel they need to draft a wide receiver round 1 this year, they're going to be able to do that. And also they want to see how these guys play. Obviously their faith and confidence in Jerry Jeudy is extremely high. Not only did they trade for him, they extended him within like 10 days. So they feel a lot there. Elijah Moore also in a contract year. I'm not sure how that one's going to go. Jamari Thrash could maybe also be the ultimate replacement there for Elijah Moore. They have a lot of faith in Cedric Tillman, so much so that he didn't play yesterday. I mean, technically their 4th wide receiver, but didn't play in the preseason game yesterday, which I thought was kind of odd. Maybe if you put him out there as a wide receiver 1, a little more confidence. Yeah. David Bell is different than everybody else. David Bell plays with a quarterback mentality. He knows how to find that open hole. He had a big touchdown against the Jaguars in a big game last year. He did have 2 touchdowns receiving in the season finale against the Bengals, caught 7 balls in the playoff game. So David Bell they like, but it's a niche role player for them. I think they just stuck to the plan. They wanted their wide receiver room to be a today wide receiver room and hopefully a tomorrow wide receiver room. And the fact that they did not have to they never wanted to guarantee any more money to Cooper. They were able to satisfy him without putting any more money on the table for future years with Amari Cooper. So that's a win. The Browns don't lose these types of negotiations nowadays. They set a bottom line, and it's usually the player that comes in at their number.
Jeff is amazing, and for more on Jeff, check him out over at the Locked On Browns podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you here today on this Locked On NFL Monday edition episode. Thank you again for being here with us and tuning in today. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have more NFL content from your Tuesday host, so be sure to stay tuned for that. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On NFL.